What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mike Dolce Show. Stan, the Rhino Efferding in the house. What's up, brother? Early.
I'm doing good. Yeah, I am early this time. I didn't get lost on the way here.
Yeah, well, that's always my fault.
Technology, the MapQuest stuff, sending me places I'm not supposed to be.
How much do we rely on that right now?
Too much.
Too much.
Yeah, it's glued to me. But it's been since, running your business, you kind of can't do it without it.
Absolutely.
You know? Problem is you get distracted now. You got the social media stuff, and we try and say that's business too because we have to stay informed, just up to date, right?
Yeah.
I almost feel embarrassed. I had to start that little social media site, a few years back to try and promote my products and myself because that's a business now.
Yeah.
Getting on there, and some people, on their Instagram and YouTube and what have you, have hundreds of thousands of followers tuning in, and you got to play the game.
You got to be there.
Thing's huge. It's been epic to see look at what Mark Bell's done since 2009.
My God. Yeah.
He's just become
the people's coach.
A people's coach.
Right?
A
Super
household name. He's made an absolute fortune. Somebody from rags to riches off of, just a passion that he had. And he's really optimized it. It's been great.
That's what translates. That's what translates with Mark. That's what translates with you is there's transparency. Here's a good guy who set a goal and is taking the community along this journey with you. It's not like Mark is sitting there like other notables are pointing, doing it in a condescending way or a greedy way. There's a passion behind it with yourself. I know you for a while now, and having you on to talk with our audience about what drives you translates to what Mark is doing. And I think that's why you've taken off. You're one of my favorite YouTube channels and YouTube fitness personalities. But long before that, you're Stan Efferding. And as you were talking before, we're talking about GPS. We're of the generation that we remember when MapQuest, you would print it out from AOL dial-up.
Oh, yeah.
Well, even before that, we remember we'd actually have to go and buy a map at the drugstore, right? Yeah. And actually use a map. That's how my wife and I drove cross country after we got married.
Exactly. I was about to say the same thing.
Right.
Those giant
fold
maps.
Out map,
they
pull
were
over
huge.
on the side of the road.
Yep, the gas station.
Yep.
Yeah. You have to draw out, try and fold it in such a way, and you could never put them back together the way they were. And then you're on the freeway driving 70 miles an hour, looking at your map at the same time, trying to figure out where the next exit is. That's always
safe driving.
Yeah.
Now we're watching Instagram while we're driving 70 miles an hour. Unfortunately, that's a scary thing. There was who was it here? Dr. Bo Hightower talking about different topics, and he had said if they really cared about safety, and who is they? And we could say they is government, they is the tech company, they is whoever. The automobile manufacturer, they would build a kill switch into the phones that you can't. It disables calls and texts.
Yeah.
If you're going over
or a breathalyzer for alcohol.
Right.
Yeah.
I would gladly.
Save tens of thousands of lives every year.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I guess that's where we're headed with these self-driving cars.
Yeah.
If they'd quit crashing.
That little bug.
Yeah,
that little
just
bug.
hop into one of those.
Right.
Forget about the millions of jobs that will be lost by.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For the high risk of injury.
It is.
They keep crashing.
And it's really interesting, especially when you have kids. One of the first things my good friend, my college roommate, said to me when I had kids, or had a kid, like the next day, he's like, "Congratulations, people driving too fast." And almost the next morning when you wake up and you've got your child in the child seat in the back of your car, it completely changes the way you feel about driving and the road. And then you start to look at statistics because you want to go down and try and mitigate all the potential harms that can become, that can hurt your child.
Yep.
And one of the top ones is car accidents.
Yep.
Probably the top one. And there's falls and there's, obviously drowning is another, big one. And of course then the medical issues.
Sure.
But in terms of accidents, cars is the big one. So, you try and manage that as best you can, but that's just another example of how cautious you become, how life changes as you get older and put it into perspective.
Well, how many kids do you have?
I got 2 now, and my 18-year-old is my stepson. My wife and I have been together 17 years, so raising him since he was almost 2.
Beautiful. So 3 children, and your youngest is how young?
5 and 3. The daughter's 5. She's in kindergarten. The boy's 3. He's a hellion, of course.
Yes.
I took my daughter to kindergarten. And the first week I would park and I would walk her to school and hand her to the teacher. And the first day of the second week, I'm driving to school, getting ready to park, and she says, "Daddy, you can just drop me off. I know how to get there."
Okay.
Yeah. I'm
Big
looking
girl
over,
now.
I'm like, "Excuse me?" 1 week of school. And then I go in, it was just a couple of weeks ago, for my first parent-teacher conference with my kindergarten teacher. And I'm sitting there just, practically in tears talking about my daughter.
Yeah.
And she's this and she's that. And I'm like, yeah, my little 5-year-old daughter. So it's been, it's the funniest thing about it is you wake up one morning and you realize you're not the most important person on the planet anymore.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And everything that you do and everything that you are becomes about them. So
and you
whole
see
different perspective.
You see the world through their eyes.
You do.
And you see how the world is evolving, let's say. Just how the world constantly changes, it always changes, and every generation says our generation is the worst, and what's wrong with that generation, okay?
Yeah.
But as a parent now, me too, I have 2 young ones at home. I have a 2.5 and a 1-year-old,
Yeah.
so you see
You're not
20...
getting much sleep.
No, it's it's gangster. We're gangster, man.
Yeah.
But that's the most important thing, and it's 4 a.m. with a smile, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. With a smile, and it's never an issue, never a problem, and that's the beauty of it. Right? That's part of the evolution, I think, of us, in the changing times.
Yeah, and of course you start getting more interested in all the things that you probably shouldn't be paying attention to, like politics.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
What are we leaving our children, and what are we doing to our kids, and with the deficit and the debt and all those other things and healthcare, et cetera. So
how many trillions?
Yeah, I had to turn that off for a while. I might have mentioned it before, but I tell you, it was depressing to me.
Yeah.
Going through that the election, and it's just as bad now or worse. It's just depressing. I watch it. I never walk away in a good mood.
Yeah.
Whether it be talk radio or whether it be the cable news channels. It's I have to turn that off. It's negatively affecting my attitude.
And how many other hundreds of millions of Americans, but global population, you look in Canada, you look in the UK, you look in France, you look in Germany, you look in Uganda, you look around the world, and every government sucks. And all the people are fucking pissed off and screaming about it. Yeah. I'm here as a father looking at, like, what are these? These are the people that are in charge? Who put these people in? How do we get them the freak out? And this, everybody. I'm not political as far as a party affiliation goes. It's just common sense and fucking idiot. I see way more. I don't know if I see hardly any common sense running around in politics now.
It's become its own ruling class, and it's all about favors and right pocket, left pocket.
Yep, big money.
It's terrible. It's huge money. I was just in D.C. last week. The richest city in the world. And the attraction to come there and to suck on that teat, if you will.
Yeah.
Whether it be lobbyists or any other company.
Power.
It's power.
Power, baby.
It's all about
more important than money, even, right? It's the power.
Yeah.
The control, the say so.
And I can't remember. It was I think it was Denzel Washington said something about because I turned the TV off, and of course now I'm not informed, right?
Yeah.
And I think he had said
you're better informed.
Yeah, I think, and he was quoting someone else. He said you're either uninformed or misinformed, and so I turn it off with the understanding that come election time, you're one man, one vote, like everybody else. You're probably going to vote your party line. Yeah. And aside from that, then the rules are the same for everyone, without all the bitching and complaining. Yep. Taxes are as the taxes are, and you navigate that rule book as best you understand it. And so you go about living your life and managing your business as best you can within those rules. And when the opportunities present themselves to make a vote to change things for your perception of better, which might be somebody else's perception of worse, you cast that vote. And if it doesn't go your way, then it's the other way, but it's for everybody. Yep. And so I'm trying to implement some of that and stay focused on the things that matter to me. Because what I find, though, even with all of the disparity and the disagreement amongst politics, I don't see it. I travel all over the country and all over the world, and I don't see it person to person. Yeah. I still see the same folks with the same dreams and desires. Most of the people, of course, in my industry, they just want to make a little more money, get a little healthier. Yeah. And in so much as I can help with that, then I think that things are still going pretty darn good because, generally speaking, the demeanor is still positive one-on-one.
Of the actual people.
Of the actual
humans.
people. Yes, the humans.
which should be the ruling class. That's the ownership class, right?
Right.
We should be the ones, and that's the illusion of a democracy that we seem to have here right now.
So I try and stay focused on the message that I can send.
Yeah.
Which
is powerful.
Yeah. What's my goal? What's what changes can I make? What lessons have I learned that I can now share and impact the lives of other people?
Yeah.
And in so much as that creates a business opportunity for me, that's great. As long as the information's changing people for the better, then I'm happy to pursue that. Obviously, I have interests outside of strength and conditioning and health and nutrition and sports performance, but that's my passion. That's what I love to do. That's what I'd like to do all the time, and that's what I've been traveling for a lot this year with some great people, learning a lot along the way.
Yeah. So you've been busy. You're running around everywhere. I see Stan Efferding effing shit up.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to recently?
Mostly seminars. I'm doing a lot of that, and obviously I still have the rants going. I'm trying to put together some ebook stuff and a kind of a book summarizing a lot of the information that I end up supplying people anyhow when they hire me for training and nutrition advice, etc. Dispelling some myths, maybe. Trying to minimize the perceived importance of so many things that probably aren't that important. I have a pretty simple message. You've heard it before, and it's just a matter of trying to get people to participate, get them to comply, get them to be consistent. That's the hugest challenge, the hugest piece. I was just on Mark Bell's podcast last month, and I told him that I get frustrated with motivation because it seems like it's almost something that people tune into to get a fix, but they don't make any changes because we have such a high failure rate that the behavior doesn't change, the action never occurs. They get the inspiration, but the perspiration never happens, or if it does, it happens for a very short period of time. They don't have a kind of a long-term outlook, and so I get frustrated that so many people are capitalizing on motivation now. But what are the results? Show me long-term results. I hate motivation without information, without education. I'm so frustrated, and not just with the industry as a whole, but myself as well, that there isn't a better solution to this. When you provide people the education and the information and the support and the motivation, that we still have such an enormous failure rate in terms of our obesity, heart disease, everything.
All-cause mortality continues to increase.
And it's
pharmaceutical profits continue to increase. Health industry, sports supplements, we go down the list.
Yeah.
Every industry that's supposed to be combating this is increasing with record profits, year over year, record profits. But people are getting sicker, fatter, and less healthy.
Yeah.
Where's the disconnect?
Yeah. And we're tackling problems after they've occurred, rather than functionally before. And whether or not you hang your hat in the functional medicine or in the traditional medicine, closet, really doesn't matter, as long as if it would be nice if at some point we would start to see some sort of progress.
Yeah.
We would see obesity declining. We would see heart disease declining. We would see, diabetes declining, childhood obesity. I think we left off on that at the last program with respect to childhood obesity in kids. And at some point we said, you kind of give up on the adults. The people tend to do as they've always done. What was the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know?
Yeah.
People tend to do as they've always done. It's so even advertisers, they chase teenagers because they know that once somebody's made a decision, whether it be a beer that they drink or a cigarette that they smoke or a food that they eat, when they're in their 40s or above, that's their brand. You're not, and the same thing is true in terms of incentivizing people to change their behavior. It's really difficult with that crowd.
Yeah.
They're, have kind of a 90% recidivism, long term. They just become a kind of a yo-yo. But with the kids, the opportunity always begins with the kids. How do you impact and change their behavior? And if the parents are not educated or not health conscious with respect to their children, it's really, really frustrating. It's almost criminal. It's almost as though you want to intercede. When you see an obese child who's got potentially type 2 diabetes already,
eating a snow cone and a Coca-Cola.
Bingo.
Right?
Yeah. And it's a very difficult path to go down because there are significant genetic components to where children of obese parents do have some of their same metabolic characteristics, and they may be or are, as evidence shows, more inclined to gain weight eating the same amount of calories as Susie or Bobby that's not heavy.
Sure.
I think we both believe that that's probably a smaller portion than what's
tiny. I would put it at single-digit percentage of those who are actually experiencing the effects.
The same is true when you talk about people becoming medicated for things like hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
It's much smaller than
absolutely
that which is prescribed for, as we see in all of the medical industry, which is statins, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
A very, very, very small percentage of people need those medications, have genetic predispositions to hyper cholesterol or any other, or type 1 diabetes, of course.
Sure.
There's needs for those things. But that tends to be our first, the first thing that we chase is, I have a disease.
Yeah.
I need medication.
Yep.
But there's no cure to that. You're managing symptoms. You're never curing the problem.
And that's most people want. They want the pill. I'm broken. It's not my fault. I have a disorder. It's genetic.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to my doctor. I'm going to take a pill, and then I'm off the hook from a accountability perspective. And you could have a genetic predisposition. We all have certain ones, but lifestyle, we know. The same science that says there are genetic predispositions is the science that says those are affected by lifestyle. Those are essentially turned on or turned off, made worse or made better through simple lifestyle. And those who, in our business, your business, say that they're afflicted with these genetic issues are typically the worst when it comes to the lifestyle issue. They feed so far into that I'm broken excuse.
I agree. It is a small percentage. And even if a genetic predisposition exists, your lifestyle can determine to the greater degree whether or not that ever manifests itself in symptoms or health problems. A perfect example of that is from The Biggest Loser. It's Bob Harper.
Yeah.
He's had a heart attack recently at 50 years old. Very healthy individual, right? Yeah. He lived his life according to all of what we would assume to be the healthiest.
He's the healthy guy.
He's the healthy guy.
Yeah.
But his mom had a heart attack. He had a genetic predisposition. Recently, we had Dallas McCarver pass away, and he had a massive heart attack. There were some major confounding factors in terms of his weight and his drug use, et cetera. But he had a pre-existing condition. Yeah. At 26 years old, he had major blockage of the arteries. And I've found over the years that most of the people who, we saw this in instances where things like stimulants would cause a high school football player to die. Yeah. And people would go chase down and say this stimulant is dangerous for everyone. Well, under further examination, you find out there was a pre-existing condition, or a valve condition or heart flutter or something like that, where people are susceptible to varying degrees based on their predisposition. Yep. So they would be the ones who would have to be more cautious, but generally speaking, they don't know in advance. Yeah,
and with Dallas, maybe you can help clear this up. I'm just perplexed. The report of his was it free test was?
I think 55,000 is what I heard. And I was just down in Florida with Dave Palumbo, who released his and spoke about his autopsy report. Now he was the one who used that number, so I'm speaking secondhand based on his possession of and discussion of the autopsy report. Again, I hate to get too far off the rails because we just got done talking about how such a small percentage of people are predisposed. Yeah. And such a small percentage of people, as in Dallas's case and some other bodybuilders and powerlifters who pursue, and even, 350-pound linemen and playing football.
For sure.
Who push their bodies to that degree are a very, very, very small percentage. And I think that what I try and do now, and people just hate it. They just hate it. It's no bigger prude than the reformed prostitute. They just hate that I'm coming out talking about health. Yeah. This meat-neck steroid user and,
But it should be hand in hand.
It is hand in hand.
You have to mediate the downside of chosen paths if you're aware.
Well, and I have a lot of experience on both sides.
Yep.
And I've followed my journey very closely. As you know, I've done monthly blood tests
Absolutely.
for over 12 years. I
Yeah.
have well over 100 blood tests.
That's
I
what you have to.
$50,000 monitoring my health over the years.
I want that book. I want to read that book
Yeah.
with your notes from those time periods.
And that's something I'm trying to put together to help people
That'll be awesome.
avoid some of the things that I experienced through my competitive career, and how to overcome. For example, when I got a degree in psychology, my first degree at the University of Oregon, I went in and I wanted to get an MSW, a Master's of Social Work. And I went to the professor and I said, look, I'd like to get an MSW. And she said, what do you want to do with that? And I said, I want to be a counselor. She said, what do you want to counsel? And I'd grown up in an addicted family. My mother was addicted to alcohol and painkillers, and has all her life been addicted to a number of prescription medications, and has mental disorder, et cetera. And, so I thought maybe I could help people with that. And she says, well, have you ever been addicted to anything? I'm like, no. Well, how are you going to help somebody and you have no experience in that? And I was like, wow, so I've got to be a drug addict or an alcoholic to be a counselor. And she kind of looked at me, yeah. And I found it pretty interesting. If you haven't been there, if you haven't experienced it, I think in your episode, you just said, was it Rob that was talking about eliminating the cell phones?
Dr. Hightower. Yep.
Dr. Hightower. I think he mentioned at that time that when you come out of med school and you've learned everything you've learned, you know nothing.
Awesome.
You know absolutely nothing,
Yeah.
because you haven't applied anything and you haven't interacted. And I've spent 30 years, not just as an athlete but as a coach, applying the knowledge that you and I have been exposed to for our lifetime, our adult lives now, and watching how it impacts people, both personally and professionally. And traveling the world, or having the world travel to you and speak about these topics with experience. And, what we've discovered along the way is that nobody's the same, and that you really have to get in and, try and find out what the underlying causes are, or with terms of sports performance, what can help someone achieve their goals. And so, when I come out and say that I want to help people, and I have a health message now, and I travel around and I try and help people. I talk about things like blood tests and optimizing sleep and managing deficiencies, whether it be nutrient or hormonal. Their lives change in a very short period of time. And even people that are in sports performance, that are using performance-enhancing drugs and maybe experiencing significant side effects, can continue to compete and drastically reduce whatever it is they're using, and drastically improve their health, which improves their performance.
Which improves their placings.
Yeah,
right?
if they're taught to recognize, what the downfalls are. And I've done this with some top professional athletes for a few decades now.
Yeah, and that's where all sports should be moving to. Some sports do. It seems the strength side and the bodybuilding we can point to, because you have Dallas, you have Rich, you have Lee Priest, who's made headlines that was an alleged infection. I don't know for sure, but it's topical. And bodybuilding is the sport that people would assume is the healthiest, and it's probably the least healthiest.
Oh, it is, yeah, and mostly because the super physiological doses of things that they use, and it's true in powerlifting, it's true in strongman, it's true in a lot of sports. We saw that Russia, of course, is now not invited to compete,
and they deserve that.
Yeah,
those athletes should be banned for life. You could say
that's right. Because they're competing in drug-tested sports and they're cheating. I never competed in a drug-tested sport, so I don't consider it cheating. My pursuit was my pursuit. And I never competed against anybody on an uneven playing field, so I disregard that.
There's no moral argument. It's personal choice.
It's a personal choice what you do, and it's the same is true for, say, a woman who is postmenopausal and needs hormone therapy or endeavors. I mean, whether or not she needs it is a completely different topic. It's as much art as science. But she endeavors to improve her health through optimizing hormones. And when I talk about, you cannot talk about diet without talking about exercise. You can't talk about exercise without talking about diet. And you can't talk about either of them without talking about hormones, because everything we do with both is in an effort to impact those positively. And everything that happens negatively is usually as a result of impacting those negatively, whether it be diabetes or heart disease, et cetera. Those all start with the hormones. They can't be separated.
Yeah.
And I've been quoted as saying that you got to move more and eat less, as a basis for health and losing weight, and because we've seen pretty poor diets result in pretty good health outcomes so long as they lose the body fat.
Yeah.
But long term, it is, if you want to keep the weight off and you want to be healthy, you have to avoid deficiencies and you have to optimize hormones. And where there's deficiencies, or where hormones are, if estrogens go skyrocketing on a guy, you've got all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
And if thyroid is low on a woman, you got all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to tie those three together.
Okay.
As most researchers have said over the last 100 years, that are inextricable. Is that the right word? Who knows?
I like it.
I'm a meat neck. Doesn't matter. I can say whatever I want.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nobody's
I'm
gonna.
with you.
Yeah. So I'm trying to talk about those together. That none of them are separate. And if I've said before, if you're a personal trainer and somebody comes to you and they want to add muscle, and you don't at least try and find out if they're low in testosterone, you're probably stealing their money.
100%.
Because they're not going to add any muscle with low testosterone. It's just not going to happen. And same thing's true with a woman who wants to lose weight. If she's hypothyroid, good luck.
Yep.
She's probably not going to lose very much weight, and you're taking her money.
Yep.
So if you're not honest about, looking at all of those things together, and the same's true with nutrition. If somebody's not eating right, but they're exercising every day, you're stealing their money. You can't give them an exercise program without a diet. You just can't.
Most people who come to you, I'm sure, what should I take? I want to add weight. I want to lose weight. What should I take? What supplement should I take?
Yeah.
What should I take?
Yeah.
What are you eating? They're like, no, that's not what they want to hear.
Yeah. My first question is always, what are you deficient in? And how do we know? And I go right back to the blood test.
When was
I
your
ask
last
every
blood
athlete
test?
that I train to get a blood test. And everybody who's got a health issue, get a blood test and try and find out. Usually they're on medications, whether it's statins or blood pressure medication.
It's
or
scary.
a big
Once
one
you're
now.
on, hard to come off.
Yeah.
Hard to come off, and you need a second and third medication to manage your medication. Then you're locked in that system.
That's the problem, is they just keep
That's intentional, I
piling
believe.
on each other. Another one that's really common that people don't even think about is the antacids.
Okay.
The Nexiums, the things for GERD and for problems with acid reflux.
Yeah.
A lot of those, and it's the number 2 after Lipitor, after statins.
Wow.
The number 2 earner in terms of dollars, in terms of $8 to $15 billion a year, is that Nexium product.
Wow.
Or those antacids, the prescription ones.
Wow.
People are popping the Rolaids like crazy. That's
For
a
sure.
huge
I
business.
see it all the
It's like
time.
a $60 billion a year business with all of that.
What are we doing?
I
Fucking selling spinach over here.
have
Talking
no
about
idea.
blood tests.
I should be in a different business.
God dang it.
But those are really only approved for about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And those are for extreme cases. And what you find that experts in the industry who aren't tied to prescription medication, aren't tied to the pharmaceutical industry, will say it's, a very low percentage of people needs those.
Yeah.
But they use them because it's a short-term gain.
Sure.
But there's long-term pain involved in that kind of thing. And I just had a client reach out to me recently, and he'd been on them for 5 years, taking these
Just to
antacid
get through his
medications.
day.
Yeah, and his performance has started to decline, and his body fat started to increase. If you don't have any stomach acid, how do you digest food?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're taking these things daily.
Yeah.
Can we back up a step and just as a practical matter, you don't have to be a scientist.
Yep.
If you don't have any stomach acid, how are you digesting food? How are you getting the nutrients that you need? And what we find out is people who are taking these things are extremely deficient in all kinds of things, vitamins, minerals, just nutrients in general.
Sure.
And they build up an enormous amount of bacteria in the stomach or in the intestine as a result of not being able to digest the carbohydrates appropriately, so that now they're just getting fermented, right?
Yep.
And that's what's creating the gas and the bloating that's causing
Sexy.
the stomach acids to get into the esophagus.
Yeah.
It's not because you have too much acid. The science shows us that generally speaking, most of these people have very low acid. So how do you reconcile that? You have low acid, but you've got acid reflux.
Yeah.
And they give you drugs to reduce the acid. It's not the cause of the problem. Any amount of acid, whether you've got an ounce or a gallon in your stomach, any amount that gets into the esophagus is going to cause the reflux.
Absolutely.
So there's better ways to treat that problem. The primary one of which is one of the best ways to treat it is hydrochloric acid. You actually introduce acid that helps you digest your food.
Okay.
Another big one, of course, is changing your diet. So you're not eating a whole bunch of carbohydrates that don't get...
eating the right carbs at the right
times,
the right
carbs,
the right quantity.
Time, and being careful, even with terms of vegetables, to find low-gas vegetables,
Yeah.
that you call low raffinose or low oligosaccharide vegetables that don't create a lot of fermentation and gas in the gut.
Comes down to you got to get your diet in check before you start pointing to other areas. You get your blood work done so you identify deficiencies and imbalances.
Yeah.
But you have to eliminate variables within your diet so then we can start creating predictable theories, creating theories about what's happening, what's the problem, and start to identify the problem areas through inclusion, exclusion of certain ingredients at certain times. And most of the time, that acid reflux, that GERD, that bloating, that indigestion, that goes away in days. It improves.
Days, yeah.
It's
within less than a week, 4 days.
And your dude was on 5 years suffering
Yes.
with antacids, and then what happened? Sorry, not to cut your story.
Well, his performance was declining.
For sure.
He felt sick. It increases the likelihood of bacteria. So now your immune system's compromised. There's so many things that happen downstream when you start suppressing stomach acid as a result of what you perceive to be too much acid. And now your digestion is a mess. So how do you fix deficiencies when you're not digesting your food or drawing the proper nutrients out of them?
Exactly.
You and I have been doing this so long that's the first thing we do is we go in and we fix the diet and we look for deficiencies. And
Did you plug it in?
Yeah.
My cable's not working. Is it plugged in?
Yeah.
Step one.
Yeah.
Food.
Reset. Right. And so it seems so I hate charging for it. I really do.
I'm with you, buddy.
I'm like, this is common sense. And then you realize that's not what these people are focused on. They've got kids, they've got a mortgage, they've got a job, they've got a career. I would probably go to them for advice on something else.
Yeah.
And they need somebody to manage this for them. And I'm okay with that. I think that one of the mistakes I make is I try to give people too much information.
You got to look over your shoulder right now. What's happening on the main floor? We have a family training and a little one. How old is he? 2, 3 maybe? 2 or 3 years old. PVC pipe on his back, doing squats.
I got my kids doing the same thing in the garage.
I watch it, man.
Yeah.
I watch. It's beautiful. I love it. Teaching them young.
Yep.
Healthy lifestyle.
It's a
don't see that.
lifestyle. I'll never have to worry about them in that regard. I'm fortunate. That's the style I live. If they want a snack, I've got plenty of fruit in the house.
I mentioned, and I want to get your opinion on it. Since we have kids, we see the world through their eyes, and we understand, knowing what we know, knowing what I know, how can I feed my children processed sugar and synthetic chemicals? I know I can't. I'm not perfect. I wasn't perfect. I didn't grow up perfect. My mother didn't think to. That's fine. But now, educated like we are, we understand what these ill effects will be. So with us, we are continuously moving as our kids age away from the processed sugar products, synthetic chemicals, a little more planning on our part, but way worth it. For Easter, we say, hey, instead of poisoning your children, because it'd be a little inflammatory to get their attention, instead of poisoning your children with processed sugar and synthetic chemicals, why not give them a kick-ass basket of board games and coloring books and stuffed animals and their favorite princess toy and some treats, some homemade treats. Maybe we make treats together and whatnot. And we got lots of likes, lots of happy people, but hundreds of F you, Dolce, one candy bar won't kill anybody, and let them live a little bit. And what are you going to do when they go out in the world? I don't think you just
said that. I don't think you just said
Buddy,
candy bar is going to kill somebody.
Nope.
People always take it out of context. Even when I talked about sodium for athletes, they started telling me about geriatrics with high blood pressure in a retirement home are going to die because of my sodium advice.
Duh, brah.
Yeah. It's an 80-20 rule. I'm sensitive to it because I had, when I was in high school, delayed onset puberty.
Okay.
As a result of a horrible diet and horrible sleep patterns all through high school. I worked from the time I was 12 years old at a 7-Eleven, and I'd always work the swing shift till 11. Then I'd stay after and play Donkey Kong until midnight, and I wouldn't get home until 12:30 because I walked. And then my mom and I'd watch Welcome Back, Kotter, and I'd get in bed by 2 o'clock, and at 6:30 the alarm's going off.
Yep. And
I remember being exhausted. My dad would have to come in and grab me by the feet and literally pull me out of bed, or I would lay there forever. And this went on for years. I worked there from the time I was 12 to the time I was 16. And during that time, I was eating at 7-Eleven.
Oh, God.
Imagine the diet.
Hot dogs and jerky.
Hot dogs and jerky and those little chips with the pump cheese.
Yeah.
Those, yeah.
Ooh, so good.
That was my diet. Candy bars, soda pop,
Yep.
you know. And I wrestled 98 pounds as a freshman and sophomore, 106 as a junior, and I didn't have to diet. It's just because they already had a 98er.
Wow.
And I was probably 115 as a senior. And then I've spoken before about how when I went back to Pennsylvania to work on my uncle's farm midway through my senior year, it was Christmas, I was still 115 pounds. I started eating farm food. The farm next door had cows that we'd get whole milk from, fresh raw milk from, with the cream on the top in glass jars that you'd have to shake to drink. We'd eat eggs with bacon and lard every single morning. And within probably 5 months, I'd put on 25 pounds, 30 pounds, went through puberty. And I would say, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it a hormonal thing? Is it a biological clock thing? Or does your body wait for the right environment? Does it wait till it gets the nutrients that it needs and the sleep, so you're not suppressing those hormones? And it's hugely related to that. And what I saw recently, I saw an interview with Dr. Stasha Gomenak, and she's an MD that studied neurology for 30 years, and she did pain management, and she got into sleep as a very important part of managing pain for her clients, because she found that when she improved their sleep, blood tests, vitamin D, sleep, might B vitamins as well for most of the women, their pain went away, that the brain could heal. When given ample opportunity, the brain and the body could heal all of these problems, fibromyalgia, chronic headaches, and she was seeing extraordinary results from that. And she started seeing how it would also affect children in their growth patterns and their development, their social behaviors in terms of autism and other social behaviors, that children who didn't sleep well had higher incidences of these problems, significantly higher. That's why I preach about this so much. I don't go on a single podcast where I don't talk about sleep, because it's one of the first things I try and manage with a client.
Absolutely. One of the easiest also, right?
One of the easiest.
Easier than food even.
And I've said, many times, that it's just something you have to fix. You just,
let me cut in here for a second.
Shoot.
You're a fucking busy dude, man. You got a wife. You got 3 kids between 3 and 18 years old. So every parent right there just fucking drove off the side of the road. You're a businessman. You run multiple businesses. You're a high-level personality, in demand, traveling the world literally at expos and seminars. You're engaging with hundreds of thousands to millions of people literally every single year. But you find time to do it too.
No, here's the reason I can do all of that is because I make time. Those are my priorities. My rant on stress for success was about that very thing. Between 1997 and 2006, I didn't compete. I was just running my businesses, and my health was the worst it's been in my life, prior to or since that time. I'm healthier now than I was in the early 2000s by a long shot, because I was sacrificing those things on behalf of my efforts to build my businesses. Sleep's the first thing to go. And then nutrition and exercise, of course, quickly follow that. You just don't have time for those things. And then you find out that your health starts to decline and your performance starts to decline. And so I read a book called Stress for Success, many by Jim Lohr, many years ago.
That's good to know.
And the whole basis of this book, the whole basis of every book I read, whether it be the telomere effect, whether it be The End of Alzheimer's by Bredesen, whether it was Dr. Stasha Gomenak's stuff, every book I read on health, whether it be Good Calories, Bad Calories by Gary Taubes, they're all fundamentally rooted in the same 3 or 4 basic fundamental principles. One is adequate sleep. And you could go down a little checklist of what's adequate sleep, stage 4, REM, etc., turning the lights off, your circadian rhythms, dark room, temperature, all those things. Check them off. And that's part of my checklist.
Easy.
Regular exercise. Okay. And I don't know if last time we talked about it, but I've really been pushing these 10-minute walks.
This is when you sent me a text
a
little bit before that podcast, and you're like, hey, bro, these fucking 10-minute walks. I was like, no, I think I saw you were in crazy shape. I was like, what the fuck? You look amazing.
Unbelievable.
And so that was maybe a year or so ago. So where are you now with that?
I'm still doing it on a daily basis.
Okay.
I've given up on trying to get to the gym and do a 40-minute walk. Obviously, I go to the gym. I do 20s.
Of course.
I'm the high test guys, and they're trying
crazy fucking psychopath. But okay.
But that's not the prescription for general health by any stretch of the imagination. Matter of fact, I just recently did a video called "If You Want to Be Healthy, Don't Compete." Because some of the things I do, and I'm not talking about whether it's testosterone therapy. I'm just talking about my workouts.
Yeah.
Aren't particularly longevity focused. And I did a whole rant on that and how people try and do too much.
Yeah.
And they end up, hurting themselves or setting themselves back. This includes people who jog, which by all, measures has historically been the healthiest thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But you get people who start jogging 10, 12 miles every other day, and next thing you know, they have an actual increase in all-cause mortality. The 10-minute walks have been extraordinary. They're easy to do. I walk for 10 minutes after each meal. It increases my insulin sensitivity, decreases gas and bloating. I use it with people who are trying to lose weight on a calorie deficit, and I use it with people who are trying to gain weight on a calorie surplus because I improve their nutrient partitioning. Obviously, I'm feeding them more foods that they can. I talked about the vertical dieting, where they can assimilate more foods faster and better. And sleep, 10-minute walks, the fundamentals of all these books and all this information that people are coming out with. They get into the science and they disagree on a lot of the specifics, but on the big major things, if you could just take 3 10-minute walks a day, you don't need to go to the gym and do the treadmill ever. And that's one of the healthiest things you can do. I might have also talked about if you can stand 10 minutes out of every hour, it's the equivalent of running 10 marathons a year. That's the calorie consumption benefit of just standing 10 minutes out of every hour. Funniest thing, I've been with my wife 17 years. I talk about this stuff all the time ad nauseum. Her ears just bleed because this is the only conversation I have with everybody we see, whether it's at dinner, or it doesn't matter, lunch, friends, family. I did that rant on the 10-minute walk, and I talked about how standing 10 minutes an hour is equivalent of running 10 marathons a year.
Yeah.
She asked for a stand-up desk. So I went down to Costco, and they had one, an awesome one with a motorized drive that has the plug-ins right on the surface so that the cords aren't an issue and all that stuff. It has all the connectors. And she uses it every day. She's standing all day long. She doesn't sit anymore.
And that she does her home office work.
Does her home office work. This is one of the biggest recommendations I've used training bikini girls for almost 30 years and fitness and figure people. Back then it was bodybuilding, but for women, is that the last 30 days, you can't really eat any fewer calories or do any more cardio.
Yeah.
And as we know, calorie restriction and excessive steady state cardio can start to slow the metabolism and become less and less effective over time. But one thing you can do, because 70% of your calories are burned at rest, and here on the radio I'm making my little quote signs. Quotes. Rest is, just your normal daily activity. Now that could be sitting or it could be standing. The difference between the two is phenomenal. I'll go stand at an expo for 2 days on the weekend from 8 in the morning until 8 at night on concrete, and I'll lose 5 pounds in 2 days and not miss a meal. Yeah, because I take all my meals with me, just because of the caloric demand of just being on your feet. That's how I train people to get ready for, say, a 10K or even a marathon. If they've never done it before, a girl wants to run a marathon, then I always recommend against it, telling them steady state cardio is total crap, and you'll never get the lean six-pack, hard body that you want running marathons. But Oprah did it, so she's going to do it. That's her goal. That's my checklist. Yeah. So, that's how I train them. I don't have them go out and jog extraordinary amounts for a time. You can go out and jog, 3 to 5 miles if you want on a regular basis, but you have to be on your feet for 4 hours. Yeah. And when you start, and people, they don't realize how much they sit until you tell them you need to be on your feet for 4 hours straight. Just walking around, never sit down. Yeah. All of a sudden, they're telling me, "Oh, my feet are sore." Well, yeah, you need to adapt to that because you're going to be putting in a 10K or a marathon, and that's going to be the limiting factor is your body's wear and tear on itself, not the cardiovascular fitness. For sure. That's not the minimizing factor. That's pretty easy to train. Yep. Yeah. So I don't know how far I'm getting off topic.
Well, I want to touch on that and support that.
The last piece was hormones. I said sleep. I said, a healthy diet. Yep. which we've got to talk about all the time. Movement, 3 10-minute walks a day. And then hormonal maintenance, and that can come from a blood test, or that could come from just losing weight.
Yeah.
Drastically improves your thyroid and your progesterone, pregnenolone, testosterone if it applies, all of those things. And the types of foods you eat, which you've been a huge proponent of, can stimulate the right hormones or the wrong hormones.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And two things, touch on what you said about the time on your feet. I just ran 10 miles myself. I made a goal to do it, and I did it, and it was awesome. But it sucked because my feet hurt. My knees hurt. My hips hurt more than anything. Yeah. I was bored as a motherfucker during the time. For the first month, I said, I'm going to run 10 miles. The first 4 weeks, I walked. I walked 3 miles, and I walked 60 minutes, and I walked an hour and 15, an hour, and then 90 minutes. And I slowly, time under tension, I walked. Yeah. And then I tried to walk a little bit farther in the same amount of time. And then I would run a quarter mile and I'd walk for half a mile. Run a quarter mile, walk for half a mile. So I never actually run the 10 miles until I actually ran it.
Nor do you need
4 to 6 miles was
Cardio
ideal.
Wasn't your limiting factor.
No. Just that time under tension and getting my feet were sore as hell in the very beginning. Yeah. But we want to talk about diet. I want to touch a little bit on diet and get your thoughts in. The keto craze right now. Yeah. The keto craze is everywhere.
It is.
And I want to talk about what it is, what it actually is, and what it is not, but also, and finally, what is best. So what is ketosis? Not the ketogenic diet, because I make a pretty distinct separation between ketogenic diets and the metabolic state of ketosis. General overview of ketosis.
Well, there's smarter people than me that can get into the details, the chemistry of the ketone bodies.
Don't have to go deep biochem. We're going to have a chemist on here soon.
We have for decades in the bodybuilding industry used a low-carb diet, which is what would, kind of we refer to now as the keto diet. Okay. Whether or not you ever...
And that's my point of distinction, is the misappropriation of ketosis for SEO and hashtagging and monetization of a differentiated product. It's low carb.
For the major, most people it's low carb. When you actually get into ketosis and try and use ketone bodies for energy, there's some limited research that does suggest that for endurance events, if you become ketone adaptive, and that's not for everybody,
very few,
just don't.
A minority percentage through our research
might help a marathon runner. My challenge,
a higher level marathon runner, I will also counter.
It might. The challenge with the ketones is it's not the optimal energy source for muscle contraction. It's not even ideally, if you're a performance athlete, you doing explosive types of exercises, and that's almost everybody. That's soccer, that's basketball,
should be everybody.
That's football. That's
the average healthy adult should be performing explosive activity 20 to 40 minutes 3 to 5 times per week.
Yes.
Minimum, just to be even considered a fucking human being. You got to be doing that.
Work, agreed. And that's, of course, that's a huge piece of beyond just eating well and cardiovascular fitness is, lean body mass is going to determine.
And this is still
quality of life.
Primal, the primal movement. This is hunter-gatherer. Hunter-gatherers, they were explosive motherfuckers, not all the time, but you better believe they had stores of glycogen built up. Otherwise, they were dead. They needed that glucose for that glycolytic activity to run, to jump, to sprint, to move the fucking boulder off of, Hector's head or whatever the hell's going on back in those days.
Hey, try it yourself. Try not eating carbs, then go doing a great workout and see what happens. Generally speaking, here's a good... I'll just use the word prescription for a low carb diet. Yep. You're a type 2 diabetic or borderline. Yeah. You're having trouble with blood sugars. You're having trouble losing weight. It's extraordinary for the first 30 days to get people, quote unquote, healthy, to decrease their blood sugars, maybe change their diet habits.
Absolutely.
To get rid of all of the starchy carbs or processed sugars, too much of any of those. Yep. But the hard part is the sustainability. And every time I look at a diet, I don't look at what it does for you 30 days or 60 days. I try and see what's happened at 1 year. Yeah. Could you stay on it? And it's a really hard one to stay on. It's kind of like a vegan diet. In the first 30 days, you can lose a lot of weight. You can improve a lot of health markers in your blood work, as you can with keto dieting. Anytime you lose 20 pounds of fat,
absolutely,
your health improves. And I've talked about that in terms of the 7-Eleven diet, the McDonald's diet, the ice cream diet. Yep. They all lost weight. They lost a lot of weight, and their blood sugars reduced, and their cholesterol improved, and their blood pressure went down. When you lose body fat, your health improves.
Absolutely.
Until such time that you start subjecting yourself to deficiencies, which tends to occur in most vegan diets because people aren't as careful to supplement the things that are deficient, calcium, B vitamins, the fat solubles, A, D, and K.
Many vegans think because they don't eat animal products, they're vegan, and that's false. You must be completely compliant in a plant-based lifestyle to be a true vegan. You can't just not eat meat and call yourself vegan. That's less healthy even. That's where bigger issues come in, as Stan is saying.
You have to be very careful, I think.
And it's a harder lifestyle.
It's harder.
Right?
That's not saying anything
Shit goes
about...
bad every 24 hours, all
Yeah.
your fucking refrigerator.
And if that's your choice, that's your choice, and that's great for you. But recognize that, as even meat eaters have to do, there's a potential for health issues if you don't get adequate nutrients, whether it be micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, etc. So you have to manage that. But the point being is how sustainable is it for the majority of people? Not for you in particular. That's a decision that you made. Great. But what's our experience with the general population? When I want to look at the effectiveness of a diet, I want to see, because we know that compliance, consistency is the number one thing. All diets work when they're strictly adhered to. Long term, we have to look out for two things. Can they stay on it, and does it create deficiencies? Is it absent any nutrients that may cause you health problems in the future? Or have an excess of nutrients that may cause you health problems in the future? So that's the big deal, is compliance. And we found that keto dieting isn't that easy to stay on long term. People who diet with a reasonable amount of carbohydrates tend to lose weight a little slower. One of the reasons I believe is because the lack of water loss.
100%.
That's the first thing that's going to happen on a keto diet. You're going to lose 5 to 7 pounds of water in the first week or more, potentially. It's going to come back.
Easily.
But that's part of, I think, the decrease in performance, because now your electrolytes are minimized too. You have less sodium, you have less glycogen in the muscle. All of those things are important for firing. But the carbohydrate diet does look, research will suggest over a year's time, to be actually a little better than, assuming that they all made an effort to stay on the diet, because more people tend to fall off of the keto diet. I've been doing a keto type, a low-carb diet for bodybuilding many times over the last 30 years. That was always kind of the first thing you'd pull out when you wanted to start getting ready for a show. Carbs. Yep. But what I found is I would tend to lose as much muscle as fat. And I couldn't train as hard or as long or recover as well. My delayed onset muscle soreness would be increased over time depending on my work volume. And since I generally tend to address athletes at high levels, as you do, the most important thing is that they have great workouts and they recover from them, and they can do them often. And that's the cumulative benefit of the law of repeated bouts. In perfect practice making perfect. I don't want to take somebody that is performing horribly and just keep pounding away at them and expect that they're going to make progress.
Absolutely.
Here's a few things that come to mind right off the bat. One is, as adults, we've accumulated kind of what would you call it, a reserve of many things.
Okay.
Be it magnesium, zinc, etc. Things that it might take us a month or 3 or 6 to deplete, depending on our workload. And oftentimes when people go on a vegan diet or a keto diet, they feel great for the first 30 days, maybe even 60 days, generally because they've lost weight, and that has a huge impact on how you feel. But over time, you get deficiencies because you start digging into these reserves. Yeah. And now you start to have problems, say, with sleep or fatigue, et cetera. And that's just for the average folks. And now when you get into athletes, they deplete those reserves much faster and start to have performance and problems. Next thing you know, their hair's falling out. And I'm talking specifically about athletes that we know that have done vegan.
We know, yeah. We know for sure. High level, you know them too.
High level people, yeah.
Friends.
And that's generally what happens. You also have to consider this, and we do this on a regular basis with athletes. What's the 3 things, the 3 major things that you burn when you're training? It's going to be carbohydrates, water, and sodium. Those 3 things you want to replace as quickly as possible the second you step off the mat or off the field or out of the ring, etc. And if you can calculate about how much of those you depleted, presuming you came in full, because if you're
your job.
If you're 3 or 5% down in say sodium or water, you got a 20% decline in performance.
You're not even finishing on the screen.
No.
In the sprint.
No.
In first place, you're not even on the screen, homie.
So our job is to get them to training fully nourished and ready to train. But then the second they step out of that training, whatever the environment is, recovery begins.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm a huge proponent of replacing those three things. Immediately coming out of training, I'll replace the glycogen, the sodium, and the water. Yeah. You've heard me talk before about putting salt into their drink and sugar. And I do it in the absence of protein and fats because those will slow absorption. Immediately following training, I give them what they just burned. And then an hour later, they can start in their regular meals. But now if they've got, say, 2-a-days, and the guy that came off the mat and drank 50 grams of sugars and 1,000 milligrams of sodium and a quart of water has to train again 6 hours later, he's going to perform much better than the individual who doesn't replace those nutrients. Those nutrients are absorbed extremely quickly, and they begin the recovery process. Now your delayed onset muscle soreness is less, your performance in subsequent bouts is greater. Those things are a standard. They're I think.
What have you been using for your sugar source, post-workout sugar source?
Well, I use 2 sources because the blended, if you're using 2 carb sources, the presumption is that you can uptake more of it. And that's the ideal time because you've depleted it. Now your body will supersaturate. And that's true with everything. When you deplete and load, that your body will tend to hypercompensate. And so post-training is the ideal time for me. I'm a big fan, and for general health as well, and I'll touch on this afterwards just shortly. Big fan of taking fructose because it's a liver source, and dextrose because it's identical to glycogen, so it takes very little digestive energy. But I used to just eat a huge bowl of white rice. You know, this isn't rocket science, and I'm not a big supplement promoter.
Rocket science.
It's just convenient and it tastes good, and if I've got a nice cold shake with everything in it that I need, great. If I don't, I should have a big bowl of rice. To eat. And I mentioned with Hofthor's diet, had him sprinkle dextrose on it to make it easier to eat, to get the saliva moving, and so he could eat twice as much rice with half the effort. That's a biggie. And I just specifically while I'm thinking out with respect to fructose, there's certain things, just to the average person who's on a diet, kind of takes us back into keto. When you limit calories or you eat high fat or high protein, you start to slow the metabolism. We know that. Anytime you lose weight, the body compensates, it slows down. You want to continue to stimulate the metabolism, the thyroid in particular, 70% of which is converted in the liver from T4 to T3, the inactive to active form. You need to keep the liver happy. The liver will slow down, the thyroid will slow down, your metabolism in total will slow down. As you lose weight, as you eat more fats and more proteins, they're satiating for that reason. They slow the body down. You're not hungry as often, right? They take longer to digest. I trick the body as best I can, and I do this to increase appetite for people who are trying to gain weight, strength athletes, powerlifters, strongmen, etc. I'll tease them with a little bit of fructose multiple times throughout the day. And I'm just talking about 10, 15 grams at a time. Maybe it's 3 ounces of orange juice, right? Because it makes the liver happy. And when the liver's happy, everything in the body runs better. And I found that their appetite improves. They can eat more food more often and I also found that it improves the health of their liver when they're subsequent blood tests. And these are people who are using performance-enhancing drugs and sometimes using orals, which can be hard on the liver. We see the result in their AST and ALT enzymes that the liver gives off, which can potentially show some liver damage. In most cases, though, it's usually just muscle tissue breakdown that's being read, the urea in the bloodstream. Nonetheless, their appetite decreases when they're using performance-enhancing drugs, particularly orals. Those will zap your appetite, and I think partly because of its effect on the liver. That's what I think. I think the liver says, "Oh, this is toxic. Quit feeding me." That's how my mind works.
Interesting.
I'm no expert. Ask the chemist that comes on next. But when I feed them the orange juice, suddenly their appetite starts to come back. Their AST and ALT starts to go down instead of up on their subsequent blood tests. And this is something I experience personally and I experience with the people that I train who will do these blood tests in that manner. So the fructose can have a very stimulatory effect. And I know people, I'm not talking about high fructose corn syrup and soda pops. I'm talking about an orange.
Yeah.
Half an orange, or a little bit of pulp-free orange juice, just because it gets in there quicker and stimulates the liver.
Yep.
The liver loves fructose. It loves lactose too, and the brain eats that, and that's where it stores it. Can you drink too much or eat too much? Of course. Fatty liver disease, we know that. Now you start to have problems with blood sugars and hemoglobin A1C, et cetera. So there's, as with most things, there's a deficiency problems and there's an excess problems. But I think that kind of talks all around that.
Yeah,
technique.
Interesting. And we've been focused because of keto. It's made us start educating the population on insulin sensitivities. And most people don't understand that there is a direct relationship between what your food consumption should be, what carbohydrates you should be eating, at what times you should eat them, what quantity, and even with what relationship to other foods on your plate, if you will. How sensitive are you to carbs? Some are very sensitive, some are not sensitive at all. And those that don't know, I say carb sensitivity is when you're sensitive, you're ultra anal, you're really specific. So the food that you come in, your body, your insulin sensitivity, if you will, is very precise. If you're insensitive, you don't care. I don't care. I'm just going to put this shit on his fucking hips.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we want to always be aware of what our sensitivity is, our insulin sensitivity, and then our sensitivity to carbohydrates, how our body actually reacts to those carbohydrates. And then we start to pay attention to, well, what's the right amount? 15 to 30 grams times 4 times 8 per day? Or is it 40 or 50 times 3 or 4 times per day?
Yeah, and I guess that depends on your workload, because while the liver might only hold 100 grams of carbohydrates, fructose in particular, or glycogen as it's converted into.
But like when you're doing 20s.
Yeah. Very different story. If you're burning it, then you need to replace it.
So how many, and what 20s are? Stan goes into the gym, 5 sets of 20 reps of banded leg presses, plus squats, plus moving all the cars in the parking lot.
Yeah, I try and get...
He's like, it's not that far from it. Check out his Instagram page.
I'm trying not to lift as heavy as I used to, so I challenge myself in different ways and get a cardiovascular benefit,
Gotcha.
And a big metabolic benefit. I don't have to do cardio if I'm doing 20s.
Your cardio's done.
My 10-minute walks aren't necessarily cardio. That, to me, that's longevity, that's health, that's improvement for digestion, improvement for insulin sensitivity.
Insulin sensitivity, that's it.
It's a big deal. The reason that's important is because when you eat food, it's not determined yet where that food is going to end up, whether in fat storage, glycogen storage. And that's based on your hormones. That's based on your body's sensitivity to those foods and its needs. When I talked previously about Hafthor, he was insulin resistant, and we had to cut his weight down in order to get him more insulin sensitive, and then feed him different carbs that his body would utilize as muscle glycogen instead of store as fat. And that's important. So people can change that. They can change their insulin sensitivity so that their body starts to utilize carbohydrates as fuel for energy and for glycogen storage in muscles, as opposed to just storing it as fat all the time.
Yeah. And with you, approximately how many grams of carbs are you taking in per day?
On days that I train, it's 500 grams.
500, and your down days, your off days?
My off days, I might take in 150 grams of carbs.
And then throughout your week, let's break this down. So let me just step back when I talk about keto. When I talk about keto, there's what's known as the metabolic state of ketosis. And this is basically forcing your body to engage in a completely different process of utilizing ketone bodies as primary fuel source instead of glucose, which is stored as glycogen, and it's essentially created from the consumption of carbohydrates, but also from the amino acids can be converted to glucose. That's part of it, but we won't get there. So in order to attain the metabolic state of ketosis, basically, you have to take in so few carbohydrates that the body literally has to transfer over. You're going from a gas engine to an ethanol engine, essentially. You're completely changing the operating system, the fuel system. It's a complex fucking process, ladies and gentlemen, and it doesn't just happen overnight, and it doesn't happen just because you stopped eating potato chips. That's completely outside of the point. What we want to educate you on and make you aware of is the metabolic state of ketosis is a medically derived protocol designed for people that are afflicted with pretty specific health issues. And it works great for a niche percentage of the population and for a niche percentage of the time, typically for most people. That being said, few of the people, few of the time. So what works for most of the people most of the time? It's a variation where we're not trying to get in ketosis, but we're still being aware of our carbohydrate intake. We break carbohydrate intake down into a few different areas. Number one is ketosis. I'm taking in so few carbohydrates, essentially. I'm not even using carbohydrates or glycogen, glucose anymore. I have to switch over. Now, that is typically below 20 grams total consumption of carbohydrates per day, or 3 to 4% of total caloric intake would actually come from carbohydrates. 20 grams per day or so, and many people are switching over or not even able to achieve ketosis, the metabolic state of ketosis. From there, we go to what could be considered a zero carbohydrate diet. I'm not taking in any carbohydrates intentionally, but my body is now converting a majority of the protein into glucose because the body is still trying to hack itself, which goes to Stan's point earlier that ketone bodies are not the primary fuel source. The body has its own hacking mechanism to hack you back to using glucose. If ketone bodies were the primary fuel source, the body would be hacking us back into using ketone bodies. That's not the way. And I don't know. Prove me wrong on that one. That's my assumption here. We hack back to the use of glucose, which again is the most efficient fuel source. Dr. Andy Galpin, who's one of the most respected performance coaches, multiple doctorate, I believe, says the same thing. Glucose is the primary fuel source, period, the end.
And when we're hacking back, where do we get that glucose from in the absence of carbs? We get it from protein. Gluconeogenesis. And that happens when break down muscle tissue for carbohydrates, for energy for your brain and for your body to use. So
breaking down your own muscle tissue.
Your own muscle tissue.
Eating yourself.
And that's why when we did our low-carb diets, we'd always have these refeeds. I think that's what spawned this cheat day sort of thing.
Sunday fun day, baby.
You don't need a cheat day if you're not subjecting
Run
yourself
that past
to
your wife, see what she says.
Right.
Yeah.
So we had to throw in a cheat day, as I mentioned earlier with the fructose, to spark your metabolism back up because it would start to shut down. It would slow down. You would start burning fewer calories and less fat. You would hold on to the fat in the starvation mode. Same thing happens when you lose sleep. Talked before, you get up at 4 a.m. to do cardio, you're burning half muscle and half fat because your body in the absence of sleep starts to
break itself down.
It starts to break itself down, and it
plus
changes
the hormone manipulation. Of course, the
hormone manipulation. The big thing is that it changes your insulin sensitivity.
Yeah,
and so those are huge issues with keto diets. Is you kind of have to refeed them, and the muscle loss is key for athletes.
And when you refeed them, you're taking yourself. Let's say you're in ketosis, then you refeed 200, 400, 600 grams of carbs for that day. It's going to take you 2, 3, 4 days just to hopefully, if possible, but probably not, get back into ketosis. And then here comes Sunday again with the refeed, which is why we push back. Ketogenic Diets is an exclusionary fad program. The metabolic state of ketosis, it's a medical issue. And with the carbohydrates, we have zero carbs. Then we have a very low carbohydrate, which would be sub 100, I would put to very low carb, maybe sub
below
50.
And usually those carbs are vegetables.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a very low carb. Then we have a low carb diet, which would be between 50 and 150 or so. For the average person, stands what, 260, 280, fucking huge and lean?
Yeah, and
I mean, what... So 150 for you is your low day.
Yeah.
For me, it's probably, 100, 120. I'm 200 pounds. You're, considerably larger. Somebody's, a little smaller than me. They might be bouncing in that 50 to 75 range, but that's nearly 3 to 4 times what many people who come to us are being told to eat because they're being told they have to be keto in order to lose weight. So now they're eating butter and bacon and cheese and that shit, avoiding broccoli and asparagus and peppers and onions and mushrooms and blueberries and apples, which are those healthy, nutrient-dense, life-thriving food.
Look, if I charge you $200 for a diet because you want to lose 10 pounds, I'm putting you on keto.
Yeah.
Because after 30 days, I don't have to deal with you. I got your $200, you lost your 10 pounds.
Damn.
And that's what's happening right now, and people are selling a lot of things on it. And I like it to bring people out of a really bad position. Again,
it was like paleo.
Yeah, obesity, high blood sugar, high blood pressure. I like the idea of doing keto for 30 days to get them to drop 15 pounds, to decrease their water retention, to decrease their insulin resistance, to improve their blood pressure, maybe for 30 days. And after that, I like to try and find something sustainable for them, to reintroduce some carbohydrates. And I tend to like fruits, as you know, if I'm talking about fructose.
Agreed.
I like the blueberries. I like the oranges.
100%.
Yep. I like to stimulate the metabolism with those things. And then starchy carbs become necessary the more performance-based you are as an athlete. If you're going to swim for 6 hours a day, you're going to need 4,000 calories of carbs just to fuel the workout. So it's all
fats too, healthy fats too.
Healthy fats too. You know, that's another thing about the keto diet, and Dr. Ray Peat talks about this. He's the PhD in physiology from the University of Oregon. He's kind of got a popular following, a cult following, if you may. He is opposed to the polyunsaturated fats. He doesn't like the fact that the oxidation that occurs in the body as they're broken down, creating a lot of free radicals. And when you go on a keto diet, you're burning just fats. And that's not a healthy place to be if you're burning just polyunsaturated fats all the time.
Interesting.
We're talking about the canola oils of the world, and
shouldn't be consuming them.
Those should be avoided at all costs. I've talked about that ad nauseum. I won't bore anybody anymore with it. But as much as you can avoid those damn processed vegetable oils.
Processed?
I mean, they're made with hexane, which is which is part of is gotten from it's a fuel source from oil.
Which blows your mind that it's even legal.
I'm going to clean your fruit with gasoline, but I'm going to rinse it off first before I feed it to you.
Don't worry.
So I'm exaggerating. But the fact of the matter is that just the products themselves, just the food source itself, is something we created. It's new. It seems to be perfectly consistent with all the increases in our health issues over the last 50 years. And it was it spawned from trans fats into these supposedly healthy vegetable oils. If they're not cold pressed, they're not healthy. If it's not, virgin olive oil, and remember, olive oil is not olive oil. Olive oil can be 50% canola oil and still be called olive oil.
It's crazy, right?
And you probably saw the studies that came out where they tested most of that stuff and found out very little of it was actually all olive oil. Most of it was soybean or canola oil, mixed in with it. Those are horrible sources. They feed them to pigs to fatten them because it increases their estrogen. So if you want to eat what the pigs are eating to get fat,
there you go.
That's one way to do it.
That explains a ton. I want to take this time to thank one of our sponsors, healthiq.com/Dolce. Did you know that exercise that you're doing right now can save you money? It can save you money, Stan, Efferding. It can save you money on your life insurance policy because the fit people actually have to pay the same rates as the unfit people, because we all get lumped into those categories. So the two people next to you that are suffering from lifestyle-related illness and conditions and elevated cholesterol and blood pressure and A1C levels and all the list of the things that you should know about it yourself, they are dragging you down. So if you go to healthiq.com/Dolce, you can actually see if this works for you, see if this is right for you, and you can actually try and save money on your healthcare. So to see if you qualify, get your free quote today at healthiq.com/Dolce. Happy to be a part of the healthiq.com team. And do you have life insurance, Mr. Stanford?
I do have life insurance.
Of course you do. You smart man. You smart guy.
I've got a wife and kids.
Me too, brother.
Yeah. I never used to have life insurance until I got a wife and kids.
And same exact thing. And it's how good does it feel knowing you have a policy? Yes, God forbid. And I know you're a smart man with assets. I'm sure. But you also know that mom and the kids are taken care of.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I know we're getting past the hour mark here, but there's two things that I want to talk about really quickly that are huge for the new year.
Shoot. Love it.
Here we're into Christmas. People are going to be talking about their New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
And I want people to choose health as a New Year's resolution before they create some, usually we overreach. Create some goal that we never realized because it's just too big a change, too dramatic. And if at some point in my career when I was unhealthy, when I'd retired from powerlifting and I was injured and I had the torn labrum in the hip and my knees are chronic tendonitis and my shoulders torn rotator cuff, and I was just continuing to go to the gym and do the same thing I always did, and I was just limping out of there and I was generally miserable. About that time, I also discovered the vitamin D deficiency and found out why my immune system was so compromised. I decided that I was just going to get healthy, do no harm, and get healthy, and that became my goal. And that's why I'm quick to say every time I get on a show that I feel better now than I have in 20 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Inside and out, and it's obvious from my blood tests and from the way I feel in terms of my energy levels and my productivity and everything. And I'm 50 now. I turned 50.
God bless you. I would not a day over 30.
Just last month. Yep. And everything works if you follow that logic.
Yeah.
and I'm happy for that, considering everything I put myself through.
Sure.
And I think I was mentioning my parents as I was growing up. My dad, he was a smoker and drank 6-pack every night. And he at some point was 40, 50 pounds obese. And he just woke up one morning. I think that he worked for the federal government, so they flew him out to D.C. He was there for 7 weeks. When he came home, he had lost over 40 pounds. He just took up jogging. Stopped smoking, stopped drinking, eating less, took up jogging. He's 87 years old now. He's not on a single medication.
God bless him.
Walks the dog 4 times a day.
Yep.
Perfectly healthy. I'm saying you can do a lot of things to yourself in life. We witnessed that with Flex Wheeler, who's undergone a number of surgeries, back surgery, his kidney replacement, etc.
Yeah.
Had kind of given up there for a while, and then over the last year decided to get healthy and come back and come down from 235 pounds all the way down to 210 pounds and get on the Olympia stage and compete.
Yeah.
And improve all of his health markers, his blood sugar, his creatinine levels for his kidney, which is a kidney replacement.
Yeah.
It's not even his.
Wow.
He was able to reduce his creatinine levels. His doctor was asking, "What are you doing?" Because he wanted to know.
Yep.
Because he would test his blood levels all the time and see that he was improving his health. His cholesterol as well, and just generally speaking, he just looks and feels better and has more energy. And now he's traveling all over the world doing guest appearances. He's in China and Brazil.
Blowing up, man.
Yeah, it's
Long overdue for Flex.
And he just picked health first. It wasn't really about competing in the Mr. Olympia necessarily. It was just a pathway for him, a carrot, I think, the choice that he had made. And all he did is he was consistent. He didn't push himself too hard in the gym. Stimulate, don't annihilate. And that's all you need. You don't go from 0 to 100 when you start up these programs. You go to 0 to 1, and that's progress. Yep. The body doesn't respond when you go in and do too much. You dig a 3-foot hole, and after a week's worth of recovery, you're still a foot deep. We found that now that you can overtrain, particularly as a beginner. We see that with Rhabdo and people who start up these new programs.
Absolutely. Who'd have thought that'd be so popular now, right?
Exactly.
Or so common, I should say, not popular.
If you just, if
spin class,
anything that gets you moving a little more than you are now, just to try and nudge your way to your goal. There's 2 things I did recently. I had chronic tendonitis. Obviously, I improved my sleep. I worked with Dr. Stasha Gomenak after I saw her video. I got in touch with her. And I've always had pretty good sleep, but she taught me a few things. And
interesting.
I was able to go on there and or have a consultation with her and work on a few things that improved my sleep. So I didn't get up and have to go pee in the middle of the night every night. I was actually able to go 6 hours instead of 3 or 4.
Yeah, wow.
And a little thing like that can make a big difference in terms of your REM sleep.
Heck yeah.
And your energy.
Hashtag babies in the house.
Yeah,
right?
No kidding. That's a hard one. When I work with athletes and they have kids, I'll have them wear headphones at night and make sure the kids sleep in a separate bed, even if it's in the same room, because they'll kick a foot to the mouth in the middle of the night, and then the noises that they make all throughout the night, the squawking and whatever else.
And as a parent, you're aware that next parent
you are up.
sense is kicked on, right?
Yep. And I've got an athlete that's 60 days, 30 days out from a competition, whatever it may be, that can't get a full night's sleep because of that. Drastically affects performance and health, and so. And their immune system, which now they're getting colds, they're not recovering from workouts. Anyhow, not to belabor the point, recently I've gone through 12 years of chronic tendonitis in my knees. I don't know if we talked about this before, but I talked about it last month with Mark Bell, and I think it's really important I think a lot of people are limping around. They can't squat in the gym, or they just, my knees. I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
I had chronic tendonitis to the point where it was keeping me up at night, throbbing. I couldn't sit in a theater or a car for an extended period of time. On an airplane, I'd be digging into my knee tendons, like, you probably had that feeling maybe
a couple times
over the years. Arthritic almost, but it's tendonitis. I'm not talking about MCL or, tears or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I tried everything. I've injected my knees with everything you can imagine. And probably the only result I got was from the needle injection, not from that happens, right?
Absolutely.
I think Dr. Bo talked about some of that. It's a lot of it is just whether or not you think it works.
Yeah.
But I'm talking prolotherapy, PRP, stem cell injections. I'm talking BPC 157 and TB 500 injections. I'm talking IGF-1, growth hormone. I've done everything to my knees. This is a 12-year journey.
Wow.
And I never realized they were never healed. It was always something that I kind of managed. And when I was powerlifting, it was worse than when I was bodybuilding. Because in bodybuilding, I do more repetitions and not quite as heavy a weight. But this is always something I had to manage, which limited the amount of work I could do at any single workout and limited the time at which I could recover.
Yeah.
And I could only squat once a week, or I'd have to use alternate exercises, etc. The 10-minute walks obviously helped my overall health. But one thing that I did for my knees, that they're cured now. For the first time in well over a decade, I can say that they're 100% cured. I started doing these banded leg presses.
Okay.
Now, first thing I did is I eliminated the source of the problem, which for me was squatting. I'd go in every week and I'd get under a bar and I would squat until my knees hurt, and then I'd go home.
Gotcha.
And they would always end up hurting eventually. Whether this was sets of 15, it didn't matter necessarily, but eventually they would always hurt. Less with reps, more with heavier weight, obviously. But there would be those twinges of pain. And so I started doing the banded leg presses to the exclusion of squatting. And I started doing them 3 or 4 times a week, about every 48 hours. And I would do 20 rep sets with a good band tension. Not a lot of weight. And I would shorten the rest periods down to maybe 60 seconds. And the first set I'd do 20 reps, I probably could have done 50. It didn't matter.
Sure.
It was the cumulative benefit of subsequent sets with the shortened rest periods that didn't hurt the knees, but created an enormous amount of blood flow. And I mentioned that the knee tendon with the band never has the chance to fully relax and re-engage. So you're not throttling it like you would in a typical movement.
Sure.
Meaning like a guitar wire when you pull on it and it goes twang. That's how your knee tendon, through relaxation and re-engagement, I believe, gets the most strain and starts to create those small tears, which causes the tendinitis.
Yeah.
If you can keep constant tension on it and work in a pain-free range of motion, which meant I had to keep the range of motion kind of short. I brought my feet in and down, so I wasn't focusing on the hips and glutes.
Gotcha.
And I would only come back about as far as it still felt comfortable. Take what my body gives me. That's what the theme was, do no harm. I don't go in there until it hurts. I try and get in and out of there without ever experiencing pain, because now I'm not picking the scab, right, per se. Over time, and even each subsequent set in a given single workout, I was able to get more and more flexibility, right, more range of motion.
Yeah.
And I did this for a period of about probably close to 3 months. And I can't even remember if it was like a aha moment or whatever. All of a sudden, I realized that my knees didn't hurt at all.
Wow.
I could get down on the ground for the first time in well over a decade and not have that tenderness. You bump into something and it's almost crippling, when you hit your knee and it's got tendinitis, and it's like this massive bruising or something when it bumps into you. You can't sit on your knees on the ground by any stretch of the imagination. You can't even bend them without an extraordinary warm up,
Yep.
Just getting under a bar to squat took me half an hour,
because
I'd have to get my knees into a position that they were comfortable. I'd have to go in and do some, maybe some recumbent bike or whatever, which I used as a method to help recover from heavy squat workouts. I would use a recumbent bike because there was no eccentric loading.
Sure.
I wouldn't break down muscle tissue, but I could get a lot of blood in the knees. I was using it as a rehab method. But historically, everything I did was rehab method. I was trying to mitigate the pain that I had caused and minimize it so I could go train again. This was the first time that I'd ever experienced an actual curative effect, whereby my knees now do not hurt. And then you may have seen within the last few months, I was under the bar with no knee wraps and no belt, squatting 600 for reps. Squatted 700 with no knee wraps, naked knees, no sleeves.
Wow.
Not a single twinge of pain, none, zero. Walked out, buried, no pain in my knees. I got so excited about that.
Uh-oh.
That I started lifting heavier and heavier every week.
Yeah.
And then started eating more food because this was glorious to me.
Sure.
I had never been able to squat in many years over 500 pounds without having knee pain. To the point where it felt like somebody was stabbing a knife in it, and I would have to limp home, and for the next day could hardly bend my leg.
Yeah.
That was the norm for years, and I did it to myself on purpose because I loved to squat and I didn't want to miss it, and so I would try and take myself right up to that point, and sometimes I'd get eager. If I kept it at 315 or 405 for 20s, I'd have a lot less pain. But when I went to 500 and tried to get 10 reps, massive knee pain.
Yep.
Well, now all of a sudden I'm squatting 600. And then 600 for reps, and then 650, and then 700. And my knee's not hurting.
Damn.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm not putting a belt on, and I'm not putting knee wraps or knee sleeves on, and I'm just trying to stay in that space for a while. And I started deadlifting heavy again, because I used to have knee pain during deadlifting as well. And I had a little AC joint issue deadlifting. I just worked past it, just dealt with it.
Yep.
A little sciatica, a few toes went numb one time. But I just kept going because my knees felt great.
Sure.
And next thing you know, I'm probably 10 weeks straight, I'm powerlifting, heavier every single week, which is not smart. You should definitely deload. You should definitely.
And this is recently?
This recently, yeah.
Of course.
This recently.
Man.
Over the summer. And then, boom, hurt my back.
Okay.
Right? Compensated for all the other issues, the SI joint pain and the sciatica. Next thing you know, with no belt and heavier weight, I hurt my back, and hurt it pretty bad. One of the worst that I've had. I've hurt it a few times over the years, but it's usually just been the muscles and not the actual spine. And so I went into a physical therapist, and he felt as though it was a bulged disc or some sort of herniation. And this was the kind of pain where you wake up in the morning, you cannot move. I don't know if you ever experienced that, but literally, if you try and turn sideways, it's like somebody's grinding a hot knife in there.
Okay.
And you end up barely trying to pull yourself down off the bed onto the floor, and you sit there groaning, because if you inhale, that nerve gets activated, and so you're kind of trying not to breathe too heavy. And you sit there for literally minutes trying to figure out how you're going to stand up. How can I move? And you got to put your hands on the nightstand and the bed, and you're trying to push yourself up, and you can't stand erect. You're walking, limping to the shower, which is typical because the pain's worse in the morning, because your joints tend to absorb water at night. Hydrophilic is what they call it, and that expands those vertebrae and the discs, and then you're tipping off those nerves, right?
Gotcha.
You're touching those nerves. Worst back injury I've ever had. Oof. Very painful. Could hardly walk for a few days. Well, it was kind of depressing, and I hadn't. Just about that time, I think I was scrolling through Facebook, and I came across a friend of mine who had posted a book that he had read and helped him with his back injury by Stuart McGill, called The Back Mechanic, Dr. Stuart McGill. And he's highly regarded in the industry as being one of the best professionals with respect to back mechanics. And he has this extraordinary book called The Back Mechanic. And he wrote a collaboration with a powerlifter named Brian Carroll called The Gift of Injury. And Brian Carroll was a top powerlifter, single ply, I think multiply as well. I mean, he had a fractured sacrum, crushed vertebrae, bulging discs. I mean, he was a hot mess, and he was still trying to compete. And he finally went up to Canada and visited Dr. McGill, and he put him on a program. And I speak about this because a lot of people suffer from back injuries, including Flex, had back surgery and had drop foot. He couldn't even dorsiflex, and he was dragging his foot along for a long time. Until we got him back in to start doing some strengthening exercises. And I guess to try and do the Reader's Digest version of this is get the book, Dr. Stuart McGill, The Back Mechanic.
The Back Mechanic,
extraordinary.
excellent.
And his collaboration with Brian Carroll called The Gift of Injury. It walks you through step by step. I read the book cover to cover. Dr. McGill's takes a little bit longer. It's very detailed, but it's still a very comfortable read. Yeah. Extraordinary information. And he says a few things that go with just about every injury. It went for my knees. It went for my hip back when Mark Philippi was helping me rehab from my hip injury. Before I set my world records, I had been told I couldn't ever squat again, that I needed hip replacement surgery, and that I had torn labrum and all kinds of other issues. 2 different surgeons told me that with MRIs. So a few things that you can do at home if you've got a back problem. If you're laying around in bed, etc., and it hurts and it's sore, it's because you're laying around in bed. It's because you're not using it, and you're not. The muscles have weakened, and it's always going to be sore. You have to make a decision to get healthy and to fix the problem. It's what I do with my knees, it's what I do with my hips, and here with my back. And read the books, but Dr. McGill talks about kind of a 3-phase approach. 1, eliminate the cause of the problem. Okay. In this case, obviously squatting. 2, find pain-free movements. And he works with clients to try and help them find pain-free movements. And his book describes a way that you can find those movements. And once you find those movements, then move. It's the same thing I talked about with respect to the 10-minute walks or the shoulders or whatever. Movement is the cure-all. You know, blood is the life force. The back is the same thing. But he's very specific to say that the core is a stabilizer, not a flexor. And you don't want to be bending it. Sit-ups, bad idea for the back. Yoga, bad idea for the back. Now, yoga people will scream and yell at me, but if you're a strength athlete, it's two very opposing practices.
Yeah.
Doing yoga and being flexible and being strong and in terms of strength sports. I'm talking football and I'm talking MMA and I'm talking powerlifting and bodybuilding and strongman. That core needs to be very, very strong and stable, not necessarily hyper flexible.
Mobility is not a good thing in strength sports many times.
Many times, yeah. They're two opposing.
Range of motion is not mobility. Range of motion through a strength curve, one thing. Mobility, hypermobility is an issue.
So he said, once you find those pain-free movements, and be careful not to start bending, not start to do sit-ups and hyperextensions and stuff like that. Yep. So 3 movements he said in particular, and there's progressions to this, is like a plank and a side plank.
Okay. Love it.
And that's kind of a starting movement. And even, you know, Brian Carroll being a top powerlifter, he had to do these movements daily. The same way I went in and did with Mark Philippi, my goblet squats and a host of other exercises daily for over the period of many months to slowly build the core back up. I historically had advanced that to once you're done, you go through this in phases. First you start with the pain-free movements and the core stabilization exercises. Then you try and build endurance. Do the exercises for more time, and then strength after that. It's a progress. And I was doing the weighted carries. I talked about how great those are for, for core stabilization, and one-arm weighted carries for the obliques. But the whole core is built to resist movement. That's its intention. That's its purpose. That's how it should be trained. That's how it should be maintained. So you have to be very careful about all the bending and stretching, etc. My wife's back hurt chronically for years. She was always doing cardio and trying to do sit-ups, etc., and would have a sore back all the time. It wasn't until she went in and started doing the strength training, the resistance training, that her back, now it's bulletproof. She's in there doing Olympic lifting. She was squatting 300 pounds the other day. Yeah. It's, she's Samoan. It's a gift of hers.
You guys train hard, though, right? But gifted, genetically gifted.
She could never do that stuff before because she hadn't strengthened her core.
Wow.
And so she went through this process. But I don't mean to belabor the point or spend too long on it, but as we enter the new year and start to make our New Year's resolutions, first and foremost, I think that a resolution can be to get healthy, to not hurt, and that can be a goal, to get your blood test, to improve your sleep, to start some of these functional, do the 3 daily walks after meals, and to start some of this functional training. I don't call it functional training, but start rehabilitating any injuries that you may have, because you'll feel extraordinary. My back's 100%. I went down and squatted 600 for a double with Mark a few weeks ago after going through this program.
Wow.
So I came back quicker than most because I probably didn't have as severe an injury, but it sure felt like it.
But your focus also
and it hurt for weeks and
work
weeks.
at it is big.
Yeah.
You're putting the time in for sure.
I had to back up, do the daily exercises, slowly and gradually. Go back to my banded leg presses, my daily walks. And even Dr. Stuart McGill prescribed to Brian Carroll to do 3 15-minute walks a day with a heavy arm swing, because that engages the abdominals. So as I was reading through this, it was so exciting and refreshing to see how all the things that you've discovered over the years that have worked for you and not worked for you are documented, and by one of the most highly regarded back professionals in the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful, easy read, I think, for anybody that's interested.
I'm picking it up. The Back Mechanic, plugging someone else's product. That's awesome. But speaking of, I want to plug your own, The Cooler, so those on video can see, watching our video can see. But you have 2 beautiful, this is the newest. This is the hot shit you're dropping.
The Cooler 2.0. One of the great things about going on Shark Tank is I built some relationships, obviously, with Damon John, who bought into the business. And that helps with marketing, of course, which is huge. We got in front of Bed Bath & Beyond, and they're going to buy for their stores. And that was exciting.
Oh, look at you, so nonchalantly.
Yeah.
Whatever.
People who wouldn't answer my calls before, but suddenly answer your calls. But another thing is that one of the most difficult parts about manufacturing a product is finding a developer in China, a manufacturer in China.
Sure.
And even when you find an intermediary, your interest is not their best interest.
Yeah.
Right? They're trying to make a profit. They want you to build it regardless of whether it's the best manufacturer or the best product. And so what I was able to do is greatly improve my Cooler 1.0, and I've now come out with a Cooler 2.0.
Okay.
And we've the materials person went through and found a new material for me that the thing's bulletproof. You could drop it off a building, it won't break.
Heck yeah.
He also drastically improved all the threading, so we don't have any leakage. That's the number one problem with, if you go on anybody's site, whether it be Coleman or Igloo, the number one complaint is leaks.
Yep.
That's the hardest thing about plastics. And so we drastically improved all the threading on this. We added a keychain, we added some, some other little touches, an easy pull top, and some vitamin pockets, which is great. But and a removable protein powder cup on the bottom. So now when you pull the shaker out, you've got your little protein powder cup separate that screws into the bottom. That was one of the best things about Shark Tank, is the relationship that I built with him to find manufacturers. He has a relationship with China and with the intermediaries.
Okay.
And he turned me on to a guy who his company manufactures, I think, almost half of all of McDonald's toys.
Oh, wow.
Like 1 billion toys a year.
Yeah.
Something ridiculous like that. And they work with, and have relationships with dozens of manufacturers, because no one manufacturer can build all of that.
Sure.
And so he shopped around my next product, which is going to be the Cooler Sport. It's a half-gallon version of this, much smaller with a little side handle, and a little more convenient, lighter weight.
Love it.
And so while this one is bigger and it's insulated and it's has a great purpose for summer or kids soccer or whatever, this other one will be, I think, even better. And that's an important relationship. I'm at StanEfferding.com, StanEfferding@yahoo.com. I'm happy to pass along those names for people who are in the process of trying to manufacture something in China, who have had nothing but headaches. It's a very difficult process. Mark Bell's been through headaches and headaches with all of his products, and he's had to iron those out over the course of many years.
Sure.
Using a relationship like this, like I was able to develop here with Damon, might help expedite not only the time at which or the cost at which, but the quality of the product that you're going to receive.
Yeah.
So
If
that's what
nothing
I'd
else.
like to add. Rather than just pimping my product, I'd like to offer viewers something that may be a benefit to them, because we're all looking to, I think, get our ideas into the marketplace.
Absolutely. And these are awesome. And you gifted one previous, the first generation.
Yeah, I'm gifting you 2 more. One for you, one for the wife. I got a pink one. Unless you want the pink. It's up to you.
I will take the pink. She should probably take the black. No, she's all good. She's going to take the pink, and there's going to be, baby formula, I'm sure, in the cooler.
Oh, yeah. That's what my wife did. She'd put milk in there and take it to the park, and the kids would drink
Absolutely.
it. Yeah, and it would stay cold. So
Absolutely. And these are beautiful, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're in a health, fitness, family, whatever it is, going down to the field for the day with the kids, they got a couple soccer games going on, this is the way to go. The Cooler, Kooler.
Sham wow presentation.
Thecooler.com
with a K.
And your YouTube channel is amazing. That's Stan Efferding on YouTube. Definitely follow Stan on there. Most of you hopefully already are.
I wish I could do more on that. It's as busy as I've been, but the feedback's been awesome from the YouTube channel. Been well received, and so I hope to keep doing more of that stuff.
And your Instagram is amazing.
Yeah,
he's got
Efferding,
great fun stuff up there.
Stan Efferding. I put up what I can.
And then what's future 2018? You talked about goals, motivation, getting everybody healthy.
Still a lot more trips. I'll be in China in January. I got a seminar in Cincinnati with Eddie Cohn at the end of the month. I love traveling.
The world's greatest powerlifter, right?
God, he's a great
Eddie
guy.
Cohn.
I learned so much at these things, as I travel around. As you do when you have visitors or guests come on here.
Like yourself,
the
it's an
caliber
honor
that
and
you've
a
had
pleasure.
on your show is extraordinary. It's a constant learning experience, and so every time I come on, I'm like, oh yeah, and this happened, and that happened, and I did this, and I did that, and not bragging, but talking you through my experience with my knees or my back, and hopefully people and the diets and what's been effective for people that listeners can pick up on that stuff and apply it for themselves.
100%.
And the hard part's compliance. So man, write it down. If you got to get a dry erase marker and put it on your mirror in your bathroom in the morning, just so that and it's reiterated to you every single day, what are your goals and what are you doing to move your way towards those?
It's funny you say that. Of all the great athletes that I've been honored to work with, the greatest of those athletes all share one characteristic. When I walk into their bathroom, their fucking mirror is filled with writing.
Yeah.
That's their entire meal, and I respectfully, unless they ask me to, I try not to read it. I do, I do my thing, and they invite me, which is nice. But of the best of the best, all share that one characteristic: different genders, different geographic locations, different cultural upbringings, different skill sets, different environments.
And and the bigger question, maybe it's for a different show, is what you're doing in their bathroom. That's probably the bigger
Buddy,
question.
they're typically butt naked, damn near butt naked. Me and them for 36
it's
hours.
a completely different show.
It is a show. That will be a book one day. The bathroom diaries.
It's TMI.
All right, Stan, thank you as always, brother. It's a pleasure. We can't get you on here often enough or fast enough, and it's always a pleasure for you to come out and share this time with us. I know the audience absolutely loves you. Check him out, StanEfferding.com, at Stan Efferding on Instagram, the Stan Efferding YouTube channel, and it's thecooler.com, cooler with a K. Cop one of them now, 2.0. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the time, for being here. Thanks to Mr. Stan Efferding. And we want to thank our sponsors, Health IQ. To see if you qualify, get your free quote today at healthiq.com/Dolce, or mention the promo code Dolce when you talk to a Health IQ agent. Check it out. It doesn't cost you anything to see if you can save up to 25% on your life insurance. Very, very, very important. Also, our sponsors at Onnit. Go to onnit.com/Dolce. If you want to optimize your life, if you want to walk around the supermarket, if you've ever walked around the supermarket and not known what the hell to buy, go to onnit.com/Dolce and get Mike Dolce's ultimate grocery store guide. I walk you around the store and I tell you what to buy, what don't to buy, so that you can go and optimize your life. Onnit.com/Dolce. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, don't count calories, make calories count. Boom.